Most importantly, I think I'll speak to my experiences participating in what's now called the Battle of Billings Bridge. There was a moment when a pickup truck was coming forward, and it was very clear to me they were inching forward closer and closer to this group of people. And I just began becoming really worried that they were going to push through this crowd of people. And I suppose I felt a sense of responsibility. Sorry.
No, for sure.
Apparently I need to unpack some of this. So I threw my back against the pickup truck because it felt like the right thing to do in the moment. What I kept hearing over and over again by neighbors who were showing up and folks I knew was that a lot of the convoy supporters, most of them, had no idea why folks would be opposing them, that they thought that they would be welcomed into downtown Ottawa and that they were on the right side of history and they were fighting for freedom. I know somebody who was in the building that was referenced before where a fire was started, and I know the police and convoy folks deny the fact that that was related to the convoy, but undeniably, I feel like that's a distraction because undeniably, the chaos that was allowed to happen downtown led to that situation, and that is not okay. I have organized demonstrations on Parliament Hill. I have organized marches. I've conducted nonviolent civil disobedience. I've engaged in nonviolent civil disobedience in Ottawa. And I'll also share that my brother is Joel Harden. He's the MPP. He's my brother, and he's also my representative here locally. And I think folks really felt like they were on the right side of history, that they were fighting for freedom and this was the right thing to do. I think a lot of people are legitimately hurting. People who have lost jobs during the pandemic, people who have been torn away from their family, and I feel that too. I get that, but I also understand and believe science and that we actually have a duty to protect those who are most vulnerable, and strongly believe that as well. And I also believe, I'm a big believer, obviously, in protest, like I said. Folks saying there's a group of convoy folks that are going to go down Riverside, which is close to where we live. I live in Old Ottawa Southeast area. And what are we going to do? And somebody posted on our Facebook group in our neighborhood to show up. Thought, okay, well, they asked if I wanted to go, and I said, yes, let's go. So it was me and I think 4 or 5 moms from our street. Dad stayed home, took care of the kids. I show up, and it's about 30 of us to start on a street corner. And again, having organized for many years, I spoke up and said, has anybody here, engaged in nonviolent civil disobedience or understands what might be involved in walking in front of these trucks? And nobody kind of stood forward, and I said, okay, I've done things like this before, can I help? And folks said yes. So I made the initial suggestion, why don't we walk in a circle in the crosswalk, keeping each other safe, and we can hold the trucks for as long as we can hold them. And the initial idea was not necessarily to hold them all day, which is what happened, but to walk in a circle and kind of do this as much as we could, but knowing it was probably going to end at some point. We were 30 people. So about 15 minutes later, the trucks start coming down the street, and folks are kind of going in a circle, and pickup trucks and at least one big rig started coming up. And there was a moment, and again, a bit of this is foggy for me. There was a moment when a pickup truck was coming forward, and it was very clear to me they were inching forward closer and closer to this group of people. And I just began becoming really worried that they were going to push through this crowd of people. And I suppose I felt a sense of responsibility. Sorry.
No, for sure.
Apparently I need to unpack some of this. So I threw my back against the pickup truck because it felt like the right thing to do in the moment. was pretty intense. I think at least 2 people joined me shortly after. And there was quite a couple of minutes of them pushing me forward and blaring on their horn. I have it on video. I suppose I could send it to you. I videotaped it all somehow. But we stopped them. We did not allow them forward. And that was important. I truly believe that was important. And again, sorry, I know I'm going over time.
That's right. No, do finish this off, please.
Okay. So I guess it was about 10 minutes later, the cops arrived. And the first thing they did is they ran forward, and I was still against the truck at the front. And the first thing that came out of that police officer's mouth is, "You understand that you can be arrested for this." And I was clearly quite emotional at the time, so I screamed and pointed towards downtown, "Why don't you go arrest them?" I think it was over 1,000 people. We stood there all day. It was the most organic thing that I've ever participated in. It was not a planned event. There was no one organizer. This was folks who showed up and were at a breaking point with the lack of action by government, by the lack of action and complicity of the police in all of this, that were taking a stand and saying enough is enough. And I truly feel like that was the domino that knocked everything over, that led to the end of this occupation. Okay, so that's a very good question. I described what happened when they first arrived. After that, they kind of hung back. I would say as the group of folks, as the crowd grew, we had about 35 trucks, I believe, mostly pickup trucks, many of them with sort of Canadian flags, some sort of weird mix of the Canadian-American flag, some of them with sort of the jerry cans of fuel that we've heard here before. Police kind of stood back, didn't really engage a lot with what was happening. And what was happening, it was, again, this really incredible organic thing that was happening was myself and others talking to folks, bringing them into circles and saying, "What's next? We're here now. What is it that we want? Where do we want to go with this?" And hearing over and over again, "We're not willing to let these trucks go downtown. We're not moving." Okay, so what does that mean? And what that led to was a number of folks going from truck to truck, engaging and talking with convoy supporters. What I kept hearing over and over again by neighbors who were showing up and folks I knew was that a lot of the convoy supporters, most of them, had no idea why folks would be opposing them, that they thought that they would be welcomed into downtown Ottawa and that they were on the right side of history and they were fighting for freedom. And I really think that does speak to the impact of social media on our society and how you really can choose, or in the way that you engage in social media, you will see what you want to see, really. And these folks were seeing freedom fighters coming to downtown Ottawa. And when they were stopped and engaged with folks saying, somebody tried to light a fire in a building, there are folks that are being harassed or even hurt for having their masks on. I think some of them were actually really quite shocked by that and shocked by the reaction. Others were more hard-lined and refused to engage. Where we ended up at the end of the day was, after hours and hours, folks kind of negotiated this situation where if the convoy supporters removed their signs and gave up jerry cans, and again, this was people negotiating this, not police, then we would say yes to the police, turning them around and escorting them backwards, away from downtown. So this was a very slow process that happened truck by truck, but it did happen.
Thank you, Andrea. This was fascinating and captivating, really. It's been, I think, very helpful to hear about your particular role, but more widely the Battle of Billings Bridge, as history books will record it.